I don't even know where to start. Craig, we've known each other for 15 years. Is that about right?
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Pretty
Yeah.
close. I think we first met when you were at SSH Communications.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I've watched you. So the way I would describe it is, I've seen you do everything from field interaction to development, with a passion and a rigor that has always impressed me. You always want to be the best at what you do. I suspect it's buried in somewhere in your psyche in a combination of your military training and background, and you're just being a genuine human being, but maybe we'll find out a bit about that today. What is your current title and where are you at the moment, just to put it in perspective?
I'm the Field CISO at Netrix.
Welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, Sam. So, I have. I've worn a few hats, I guess, since we've started talking.
Yeah, you were a CTO recently, I think, right?
I was, yeah. I was the director of identity and access management at HP. Did a little bit as a CTO. Field CISO. Maybe changing that soon, so we'll see.
Ooh, is this an announcement, or is this a
warning? No, just take
it's a warning.
No. Maybe just take a little bit of a bigger role in a growing company. So yeah, kind of one of the like you said. Like I'm too impatient to sit back and wait for things to happen. I'm just like, oh, that needs to be done. I'll go do it.
Just do it. Yeah. And the other thing is you're very direct with when you see value, when you don't see value, when you see substance or not, and that has always been something that I value hugely. So yeah, it's good to have you on, man.
Thanks, I appreciate it. This is great.
I thought we might
start
off, Sam, talking a little bit about the Field CISO title, because I got
because you're also Field CISO.
Yeah, I am also a Field CISO, but I got into a conversation on LinkedIn this morning, and Craig and I were talking about it just before you were able to jump on. Where someone had posted and said, "What does a Field CISO even do?"
That's
in summary.
That's harsh.
No, I don't think that it was meant to be harsh. I think they genuinely were like, "Why is there people with field in front of CISO? Like, why is that a combination?"
I can give you my take on it, and then so let's be clear. First of all, that the biggest problem in security, I think, is the gap between security and the business. Most of us, as we got to be CISOs, we had to be the smartest cyber people in the room, like, period. And so you go up, and then you hit the CISO rank. And guess what? That's not what the job's about, right? The real CISO job is, in fact, about lateral relationships, and it's about speaking to the business. And you turn up and you go, "Hi, I'm Mr. or Mrs. Risk." And it turns out that's actually, there are other people that do that too. There's legal, there's operations, there's finance, and they speak a completely different risk language. And so while we train everyone, hey, you're the voice of risk, it's actually not entirely right. We're supposed to actually be business people first when you get there, and we haven't had any training in it. And so the reason I mention all that is because, and I promise I won't pontificate for long, but what happens is we all have a fantasy of resignation, and we have huge substance abuse problems. And what I mean is, right, there's a high incidence of drugs and alcoholism and obesity and people not taking care of themselves because they can't communicate the risk that we really do have to the business. And they're seen as hobbyists, or they're locked out of meetings they need to be in. So what happens? Well, those who do it really well, eventually they change companies and they don't do really well in the next place, right? And it's difficult to really sum that up, bring it across, so a community is needed. And so for a little while, many of us spend time in the field, sharing the tips and tricks we've learned, helping companies understand how to talk to the business, help their customers succeed. So unlike, say, a CTO role or like a head of R&D, a field CISO is a different creature. In fact, I was telling you, Jacob, earlier, and I mentioned it to Craig, it's almost a CISO in residence at a certain point. And yes, there's a higher percentage of them, I think, than in other functions. But like a CTO, a field CTO doesn't sit there and tell CTOs how to be CTOs. But a field CISO becomes a best friend to the CISO. And by the way, they go in and out of the CISO role all the time. Everybody who's in the CISO role has to spend some time for their company talking to customers. The question is, do you do it 30% of the time or do you do it 80% of the time? That's my take. And I will now shut up and hear what you think.
Yeah, let's go Craig next on his take, and actually just maybe just talking about what your role is and how it touches on so many things. And I'll go last, and I'll share a little bit about mine.
I really like that, Sam, and I view it much in the same way. I think a big part of my job, whether I was on the practitioner side of the table or on this side of the table as a consultant, is going to the business. I had the blessing or misfortune, depending on how you look at it, of joining cybersecurity from a non-traditional role. I came at it from a military perspective. And the military perspective is
what
really
year was that when you made the transition?
2007.
Can I ask a sidebar on
sure.
How did you get into the military? Did you go from high school and you went to a recruitment office and you're like, I want to be a badass, or how was the...
Yeah. My grandfather was an Army Ranger, and I was kind of messing up in high school, and I remember him knocking on my door, punching me in the face, and opening a beer and being like, we're going to figure this out. You need to go put on some boots and get your shit together. I was like,
now that's a grandfather. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So did you go into the military then?
Yeah. I joined. I went through infantry school and airborne and did all the stuff and jumped out of planes and had a great time. I loved my time in the military. But then when it was time for me to get out, it's kind of in a world where I was like, I don't know what to do. I have a high school diploma and I'm trained at something that doesn't translate to the civilian community at all. I fell backwards into my first job was actually at HP. I went to my cousin's going away party. She was going to Afghanistan in the National Guard, and met a guy named Phil Parker who gave me a shot that I shouldn't have had, right? I was supposed to be an unarmed security guard at a Tyson chicken plant making $7.25 an hour. And he was
gave that up? Oh my God.
Yeah, I know,
for
right?
This?
Yeah. He was like, hey, I'm going to teach you UNIX. And I was like, what's UNIX? And he was like, it's fine. I'm going to pay you $10 an hour while we train you on UNIX. You do like level 1 help desk. We'll give you a script. And then once you know it, we'll talk about giving you some more money. And
then you're like, you had me at $10 an hour. Yeah.
Right. Immediately. And kind of that military training in me kept me relevant. I was just, number one, I was working with all these people who had high school or had college degrees and certifications, and they knew how all this stuff worked. And I was just quite frankly scared of being the dumb guy in the room who got found out and lost this new way of making all this wealth. Right. So I was like, $10 an hour, I can't lose that. So I better figure out what the heck HPUX is and then go from there. And that was in 2007. That kind of launched my career. And that same thought process I've kind of kept with me, right? So I go to the business and I try to figure out, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it that way? And it's made me a really good it positioned me very well for the modern CISO role, right? Like, I know how to go out and talk to them and figure out how to partner with them. Provisioning processes are completely broken now with cloud adoption. The business doesn't have to go stop by cybersecurity and say, hey, can I do this? They're just going to do it and expect you to catch up if you don't want to partner with them. So I built my career around partners providing security at their speed and kind of with their expectation. So it's been really good. And to go all the way back to the original question, Jacob and I were kind of laughing about this earlier. The field CISO role is fantastic in a small company, right? I get to do so much stuff. I'm never bored. It's not monotonous from day to day. But if I was in a big company and it was very prescriptive, like, you're going to do this one thing day in and day out, I don't know that I would enjoy my role as much. But I get to do everything from field, taking feedback from the field, creating a go-to-market strategy. I have influence over product. I get to interface with our customers in a non-salesy way, to speak and do thought leadership at conferences, do podcasts with guys like you. So I wear so many hats on a day-to-day basis that it's great for a person like me who wants to be involved in everything.
I think that's a fantastic way to think about the field CISO role, at least the way I think about it too. At the end of the day, my job's to make the business go. And that means helping ensure customers are comfortable with our internal security. It means help get revenue. It means help build products. It means make sure we are the most secure company, because when customers come to us, they expect their vendors to be the most secure. And typically for me, we're the one of 3 vendors that might have access to a few critical bits of data. So Yeah, Craig, that's a really good summary. Like it's
you become the security whisperer in your organization. And the cool thing about being a small company in general, and I had this at Cybereason, was you don't wear one hat, right? Like you get to try different things. And wherever you're needed, you can step in and you can carry a project or you can make someone successful. And that's huge. I think most of us in cyber, I know a few people that are not like this, but most of us we want other people to be their best selves, right? We sort of, certainly for me, I feel like cyber is a life skill in the corporate world and not enough people have it.
Can you elaborate on that? Like,
yeah,
what is the life skill?
So I have children. I'm wondering what life skills they need when they go out, and which ones hamstring them and which ones enable them. I was just talking to a friend of mine, Greg over at Ruck, who's a CISO there, and he's doing a community education thing in the next few days. And we were talking about, so in an age of AI, what do you advise people in terms of like being aware of value manipulation and ads and everything, including things like pornography? Like some of that stuff is targeted right to the lizard brain, right? So there's, how do you enable children to survive? But then most companies, cyber's not part of the DNA, even in cyber companies, right?
That's so weird, right?
Yeah, there's a startup that I'm not going to name who they are because they're wonderful, and they've got 4 developers. And their very first customer said, "Would you please fill out this security survey?" It was 100 tough questions, and they panicked. And so I said to them, hey, whoa, you don't have to have answers for all of this. You've only existed for 8 months, right? What matters is your attitude going in, that you're clear and transparent, and you give the opportunity for the customer to tell you what to work on. They're like, yeah, but our answers are so bad. I said, If they're really a good first customer, right, and they're going to work with you, they're going to understand the spirit in which you do this. Now, they filled it out. It was great. The customer got on and said, hey, can you put these 2 or 3 things out of the 100 on your next roadmap in the next 18 months? It's not even a gotta do. It's a, could you just work on those? And we forget, especially when dealing with big companies, we forget that it's about risk management and how you approach security as opposed to what the bar you hit is, right? And I just felt so bad because even this small security company had such a high hurdle to hit. And I'm mentioning all this because really it's about you. And you're both actually the security whispers within your companies. And I think that the quote Field CISO name doesn't do enough to justify that.
I really try to change the mindset here at Netrix to be less, let's stop talking about product. Let's start talking about the business problem that we're attempting to address. And then product will fill in those gaps naturally. But yeah, I agree, going in and it has to be much more than just, you have this problem, so let me sell you this product. It needs to be way more strategic. And that's where I kind of view my role as like, I understand the surrounding technologies around our portfolio, the upstream and downstream integrations where you're going to see better value add, better telemetry data, all of these types of things. And then explaining that across multiple levels, from the technical level all the way through the SOC and then up to the CISO level, and being able to speak in those different things. I think that that's a very rare skill set. I mean, the 3 of us have already had an amazing conversation, but be honest, like this is kind of rare unless it's behind closed doors and then people can like open up. But getting somebody who is a seasoned cybersecurity professional who also has the ability to speak to people across business languages and wants to do it, pretty hard.
Yeah, but you know what? Anyone who gets on the phone with you, regardless of what the title is rapidly going to realize that who you are, and they're going to value that conversation. They just are.
Yeah.
I had yeah, go ahead, Jacob. Yeah.
I think that to Craig's point, to a story that I think illustrates that skill set. I had a customer that came to us the other day and they said, this doesn't meet any of the privacy requirements that we need. And it wasn't a conversation of like, hey, you guys suck. It just was like you don't meet this. And I said, what does it take to meet it? Can you talk to me about why that's the case? And here's the business problem we're trying to solve and why we think it's important. And they said, we do think that's important. We agree that's important, but what about these privacy things? And we sat down, we went through all their requirements and how we could meet them. And said, give us a few days. We'll come back to you and see what we can do. See if it's reasonable for us to build that even. And I think that's the difference between a lot of people. Like it illustrates what that skill set is, Craig, that you just elaborated. It's ability to have the conversation instead of people just butting heads and saying, no, let's not do business. Let's walk away from the table.
Yeah, I have a very similar example. I mean, we're working with a company right now that we filled out an RFP, which I kind of have my own opinions on RFP processes. But I mean, essentially what the company said is, we're coming to you because we want to modernize our identity and access management, how we do this from start to finish for contractors, employees, third party, the whole thing. But then they sent us an RFP that was based off of the last time they did it. So we failed the RFP. We didn't even get past the RFP phase. So we went back and we were doing a postmortem. We're like, hey, you came to us and you said you had all these aspirations for user self-service and automation and all these other things. We filled out the RFP in relation to that, and we didn't make it past your scoring. They let us back in. We went into the technical evaluation. Same thing. Use cases were based off of their previous architecture, their previous use cases. So they're measuring us against the benchmarks for their environment as it exists today, not where they wanted it to be. Failed the POC. Went back in, did another evaluation. Okay, now we're going to be a part of the bake-off. Went back to the bake-off. No new use cases for the third time. The only difference was this time was I pointed out, hey, we're testing all of these old access methodologies. We're not testing against the environment that you want, and ended up getting the sale. But it was one of those things where it was, constantly going back and saying, like, part of our job is also educational. You want to get here. How do you get there? That's not always the easiest bridge to travel, especially when you've got, influencers and, the Gartner Magic Quadrant and like all that type of stuff that says like, I want to do all this cool modern stuff, but the only companies that I can work with are up here and they're not doing anything really revolutionary. Right. So it's just a lot of that. I'm sure you run into that on a day-to-day basis too, Jacob.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's no Magic Quadrant for what we do. We're the only company that does cloud native, with cloud native backup. Everyone else came from the on-prem world. We're the only vendor that built totally cloud native from the get-go. So we don't show up on any Magic Quadrant. There is nothing for us. It doesn't exist. And then people say,
who are you?
Can you send me your Magic Quadrant? Like, and then
I used to run this with cyber insurance all the time, right? People would be like, so what do you do for this? And I'd be like, well, we don't have that legacy network component, so nothing. And then,
fail.
so it's like, yes, no, NA. So you don't want to put no, you put NA. And then you have to put an explanation, and you put the same one. We're a cloud native company. We haven't existed long enough to have a traditional network with these components. Therefore, we don't have it. They're like, what do you do to protect your data center? And I was like, we don't have data centers,
Yeah. Amazon protects my data center. Call them. Right.
But you don't want to put that either. Right. Yeah. Just the other day, a large engineering firm, I was talking to the CISO, and it had nothing to do with us. He's like, man, I don't know how to do this RFP process without it just falling to the same ruts as before. I said, well, first of all, you need to just change the structure of the RFP, because otherwise people are going to cut and paste. They're going to do it anyway. But start with an RFC and go out to the vendors and ask them, what should we care about? As opposed to just cut and paste 80% of the last RFP and pull it forward. Because you know what? 80% of that came from before. And you've got something that persists from 2004. And you're entering 2024. Nobody cares about that stuff. Right. So the pace of change is such that you've really got to start over, and you've got to ask a request for comments period. What sorts of things matter? And he said, well, can you give me an example? I said, yeah, sure. Your company has an ESG. Right. It has to do with basically environmentalism and social values and those sorts of things. You have this as a mandate at the top level. Are you serious about it? Or are you not? Is that just like words? And he's like, no, the CEO is really serious about it. I go, okay, so can you in the architecture reflect how, for instance, consumption of electricity and the generation of that electricity is going to affect your carbon footprint, and therefore it matters in your RFP? Like, can you do that? I don't know. And will any vendors bother to even tell you that? So he's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I said, go through and you make it yours. Don't your job's not to get the homework done and sufficiently thick that you had people working through a weekend. Your job is to go through and find the product that's going to meet the needs you want. And if you don't know your needs, then why are you doing an RFP?
I wish there were more RFCs. I can't tell you.
Oh, yeah.
I literally couldn't tell you the last time I filled one out. A lot of RFPs, a lot of value prop type stuff where it's basically like, come in and show us that there's an issue, but not a lot of RFPs. And I agree with you too. I don't think company culture and all of that stuff takes a lot of precedent, as much precedent as it should in the buying process. It's a lot of things that end up shelfware or just don't get deployed at all because you're like, didn't think about where the company was trying to go and you bought something that just doesn't fit, right?
Yeah. I mean, heck, if you just did posters and you just did a few t-shirts, fine. But if you're serious about this, and the funny thing is, literally a week later, I got a call from some field folks and they said, we've got an RFC and we're not entirely sure what we should do with it. And I was like, all right. So I actually over Labor Day, I wrote an RFC response just because, I'm sitting around with the kids.
Because it's Labor Day weekend. That's what everyone does for fun on Labor Day weekend.
I have no life. Yeah.
I wonder if part of it's driven from, I think a lot of security people won't admit this, and it might not be conscious either for a lot of security leaders, that the fear of getting fired or not doing your job well is so strong that you're like, I have to have the Gartner Magic Quadrant checkbox of acronyms. And so you just issue RFPs trying to get the best list of acronyms put in your business because you genuinely think you're doing the right thing. And I'm not trying to criticize people unjustly because I don't think it's always a conscious choice when people do these things. They're following what the market's doing or they're following what they see other peers doing or they think it's right. But do you guys agree with that statement?
No, I think the other maybe untold truth in that whole thing is how many companies actually write their own RFPs versus going to a third party and say, hey, you're going to roll this out for us anyway. So you write the RFP, which is almost always heavily influenced consciously or subconsciously about how they're getting spiffed, what products they're getting told to push that month, all of that type of stuff. There's certainly a lot of bias in that. And that's why I say I have my own issues with the RFP process because everything is weighted, but it's weighted in a way that you want it to go, right? So you're like, I think the marble's probably going to roll to the right. So I'm just going to lean the table just a little to the right.
Yeah, there's definitely there's almost some cultural grooming that happens. And I hate that word, but we train people through, I don't know how many layers. And by the time they get to the upper layers where they're making decisions about this stuff, it's very much an artificial jargon that's being thrown around and used. And it's very industry specific. And you notice it when you finally get to another company and you're like, whoa, different industry, different vertical. What is this language? It takes a while just to adapt to that. And then you realize most of it's not direct. Most of it doesn't matter. But it's very hard to both survive in an environment, learn the language, and then still be direct and to the point and do what matters. Yeah.
All that matters is outcome.
Well, you had to deal with this in the military, Craig. I mean, isn't that the ultimate home of acronyms? Isn't that?
Yeah. I mean, listen, we joked about this. I joked about this at HP when I started there because I was like, the only place where I've heard more acronyms was the military. But we literally, one of the first things that I did at HP was we created a cyber dictionary because we had so many acronyms that it was like, we'd hire somebody and be like, hey, 6 months from now, you'll understand what we're talking about. But,
Oh, yeah.
So I literally made people stop and I was like, hey, can you tell me what that means? And it was kind of funny because they could tell me what function it served, but they couldn't tell me what the acronym actually meant. That's right. So I was like, awesome. You can't use that until you can tell me what it means. And if you can tell me what it means, then you can use the acronym. I used to use it early on in my technology career, did the same thing around scripting. I was like, oh yeah, feel free to write scripts, use the scripts that are out there, as long as you can tell me what they do. But if you can't tell me what that script does, you're not allowed to use it. Because too many times, Unix is
worse. It's going to get worse.
I know. I know.
I see the AI thoughts in Sam's eyes.
There it is. Yeah. Leaky abstraction? What? No. It's that's happening. These become functional blocks in our thinking, and then we toss them around and get lazy. Yeah, it's terrible.
Craig, what in the military? What other, I would say, lessons did you take from a more physical warfare to the non-traditional warfare.
Yeah, how do you beat up the CIO is where you're going, right? No, I'm kidding.
How do you kidnap the CIO? No,
Man, I'll tell you what, one of the things that I tell people, I talk about this a lot. We have this really great career field that we're a part of. And if you go to college, that's amazing. If you don't go to college, but you know what the hell you're talking about, that's also just as amazing. Like, I've worked with people who have doctorates who are incredible, and I've worked with people who didn't graduate high school who are just as incredible, right? I say at a certain point, we all base level understanding of what we're doing. And the only difference is the amount of lenses that we've collected through our lifetime to look at a problem through. Mm. I just happen to have a set of very unique lenses. Like, I know one of the things a lot of people talk about in cybersecurity is like stress management. That's not a thing for me. I mean, not to say that I never get stressed out, but like,
you've been in some tough situations. I know.
My worst day as a cybersecurity professional is it's going to be fine. You know what I mean? So I think it's really learning how to talk to people and weaponize the skills that they probably already have as an individual, and teach them that just because it's not necessarily a cybersecurity skill doesn't mean that it's not relevant in this career field.
Right.
But I also, if anybody, I know, Sam, I've run some documentation back across you in the earlier days of my career. I come from the military, right? We write things down to the most basic level. Like, if you read my documentation, it's not because I'm condescending. It's not because it's literally just spelled out for you. You will do this, then this, then this. And I keep that kind of as I mentor people and stuff too. It's like, learn something, do it, then teach it to somebody else. That's kind of my philosophy through life, through whatever. And I mean, I kind of stole some stuff from you, Sam, as I got more into reading in the civilian world and stuff too, is I give books away all the time. And the only rule is, if I give you a book, you're just not allowed to keep it.
Yeah. Just pass it on. Just keep it going.
Yeah. Don't give it back to me, but give it to somebody else. So I kind of keep that same thought process as I help people in their careers, whether it's, me technically mentoring somebody or, talking about speaking in public or whatever that happens to be, is, hey, yeah, I'm happy to teach you anything that I know. Open book. The only qualification for this training is that you also have to do the same thing. You're not allowed to hoard this knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And there's something to be said, by the way. I remember in engineering, we used to say you got to break it down into digestible chunks and keep making them smaller. You said something very similar there when you write documentation. And I've always felt like there's almost something Socratic. What do I know? How do I know that? How do I know that? How do I know that? But it's not a formalized thing. I'm describing it after the fact. What we do is we break it down into very small, knowable chunks as much as possible without getting into the etymology of it. But like, really, what do I know and how can I lay them out in sequence? And I've seen you do this, by the way, when it comes to, the BS claims from various vendors. You're like, okay, so you say you do this and you say you do this, and you say you do this. Now show me these pieces. And if they can't, you know that they're full of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's a certain, I guess it's a reduction to basic building blocks. And that itself is a methodology. And do you think you got that from the military? Was it something inherent, maybe from your grandfather who punched you in the face? Or,
It was, I think the military kind of perfected it, because there's this, like your assumptions. What I know about something after being in this role for X amount of time versus somebody who just got into it. And can I still distill this information down to that level, or have I lost that? Because I think at some point there is a natural disconnect and you can only speak down to a certain layer effectively. But teaching somebody something is the fastest way to find out whether you know what the hell you're talking about or not. And honestly, Sam, is one of the things that you told me probably during one of our.
What did I say? Oh no,
Dunning-Kruger stuck with me. It stuck with me literally. I remember you sitting me down like super early in my career at SSH, and you being like, "Hey, yeah, you kind of know what you're talking about, but be careful. You might be on Mount Stupid." And I was like, "Oh my god!" So I'm constantly looking in the mirror, like, do you really know, or are you full of it? And
Sam, you broke Craig.
Well, this is like, we all have a certain degree of imposter syndrome. Now the question is what you do with it.
Yeah.
Like if
Right.
you hoard and you're afraid and you gatekeep and you say, this is mine, I don't want anyone to know, that is, in my mind, evil. And if instead you're in the open and transparent, and you're like, not many people have the courage in a new job to say, hey, I don't know what that means. Right. And to ask for help. But what you're doing is you're building trust, and it's not a confidence in the subject matter, which you don't necessarily have when you first started a company, but it's a confidence in yourself and your ability to be in a position and to work with others that makes you great. Right. So there's like these two responses to that fear. One is I'm going to hoard it and keep everyone away. And the other one is, I'm going to be open and transparent and genuinely try to find the truth here and pay it forward. And I think those are I don't want to call them, evil and good approaches. And we know when we find the evil ones, right? And the trick here is to keep creating more of the good. If that's too simplistic, I apologize, but that's how
I love that. And it goes all the way back to what Jacob was saying earlier. You know, I think there's a massive fear around people losing their jobs. But the other side of that whole coin is, man, we work in a career field with a negative unemployment rate. Like, there's more jobs than there are qualified people. So if you're scared to ask questions, what are we doing? And quite frankly, what does that say about your leadership? Because me in a leadership role, I want everybody to ask. If I'm in a room with 30 engineers and nobody has any questions, y'all either don't care about what we're talking about or you're not paying attention. Like, we should not have everybody who's in this lockstep. Like, somebody's got to raise their hand and be like, I don't understand that. Or, can you explain that to me? I don't know what we're doing here. What's the goal? Whatever. But yeah, empowering people to ask questions, the only way that we get better. But it's kind of also, I think it maybe is a character flaw or character trait of the people that are attracted to our organization, is like, we're all kind of, not all of us, but the vast majority of us are kind of loners who are totally comfortable working in a room by ourselves. Yeah, a little damaged.
Yeah. It's a little bit of that.
But then, you know, we also, then all of a sudden somebody comes and they're like, collaborate. And you're like, why? I got it. So it is a change. It's a change in across the board, but man, I've seen that work though. When you get a group of people who are not scared of losing their job, who are comfortable asking questions, the amount of change that you can create in that environment is just insane.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. So we have to switch gears a little bit. We've talked about work context, and I know you're wearing a rugby shirt right there. So, Rugby World Cup's coming up, and I know we talked a teensy bit about it, but are you excited about that? And
oh man, yeah, Saturday, right? Got the first match, All Blacks in France.
Yep.
Rugby is also one of those things. It's kind of, we could make so many cybersecurity analogies. I know you were a rugby player.
I was huge. It was big for me in the early 90s. A lot of folks don't know that about me, but I used to play semi-pro and competitively. But yeah, I loved rugby. It was a big thing for me. It's kind of the same thing, right? It's a lot of strategy. Sometimes it can just seem like you're kind of beating your head against a wall, and then all of a sudden, boom, and you're like, I didn't even see that coming. But cybersecurity is the same way. And that's kind of talking about our roles as field CISOs and stuff like that. It's the same thing, you know, taking a step back, looking at what a company is doing, finding a strategy kind of in that chaos and then starting to execute it. And a lot of people won't really even see it. It just looks like we're still pounding the ball down the pitch. And then all of a sudden it's out the back and it's try time. Right. So, but yeah, that's, rugby is that beautiful game of chaos that my dad used to call it a thug sport for gentlemen, and he used to call it soccer a gentleman's sport for thugs. And no offense to any football that is the most players.
Accurate analogy that I may have ever heard about both those sports. I've never heard
true.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. But I have to say, so I played soccer as a kid and loved the game, and I played hockey and I played a bunch of other sports, and there's like this bubble around you when you play most sports, right? There's like, I'm here and I got my personal space, and there's occasionally somebody comes into it, especially in like American football where there's a lot of sprint and sudden impact. But I was a forward in rugby, right? So I used to play loose head prop, and I played 8-man. And so for those of you who don't know, that's that pack of people running around chasing the ball very, very closely and getting in the scrum. That's
the thugs.
Yeah. But the thing is, you're so close. You're in each other's personal space, holding on to each other, pushing. You feel closer to those people after about 5 minutes of play than I felt in some and than I ever felt in some cases, but in a certain whole season of other sports. There's everybody pushes and struggles in the same direction inside each other's personal space. Craig, I don't know if that resonates with you, but it's like nothing else.
I played in the pack too. I played in the backs a couple of games, but the pack, they're a
little loosey goosey and artsy fartsy, but that's okay.
That sounds like where they put me then.
Absolutely my favorite, right? And exactly like in football, I played on defense. So if I got the ball, something went wrong, and then they were like, rugby, you're on the pitch all the time.
Football,
everybody's on the pitch. Everyone's playing.
Or? Yeah, American football. Yeah, American football. But yeah, rugby is just, and it's also weird the amount of like highly educated or like doctors, lawyers, cybersecurity professionals, like all the way down to like blue collar. Like you're going to meet people from all walks of life playing rugby, and they all have the exact same respect, right? It's kind of the same. There's one referee on the pitch at a time, and they're controlling 30 large individuals who, and all of them respect the ref with complete authority, right? There's no arguing.
Oh, yeah. Look how few substitutions there are.
Oh,
there's none of this like take a dive, roll around moaning on the ground. That doesn't happen, right? Because you get it. Like honestly, you only go off if you have to be dragged off, right? This is the thing. It's amazing. Yeah, go ahead. You're gonna say.
Do you know about this? So in 15s rugby, you can only dress 23 people. Is that right? 23 people. So if you're on the pitch and you go off, you're done. That's it for the day. You can't go back.
Come back.
Right.
So you only have 8 substitutions. So that's where I kind of get this camaraderie aspect.
When I first played, it was 2.
Oh,
it was 2. Right.
Yeah.
So it was because I played the old rugby union versus rugby league, and you couldn't make money playing in those days. Like that's why it was semi-pro. There was no pro back then. Well, that's different now. And, it was, so I said it was a thug sport for gentlemen, and that's unfair to the women out there because, we used to say, by the way, there's a position for every body type in rugby, and there really truly is. But, some of the most violent rugby I've ever seen is by 2 groups. One is pros. They're just a whole different game, right? And the other is women. When I watch women play, it is just a different game. They're amazing to watch. And it is an amazing sport, but it's a different game from when the men play for some reason. And I don't mean that in a sexist way. It's just a different game. Like,
in my opinion, it's a more beautiful game.
It is.
You can see the strategy unfold. There's a lot of times in men's rugby where the game kind of goes. They just have one super freak athlete on their team, and
there's always that guy who can raise his knees to his like shoulders height. Yeah. He's like playing all the way back and just run, and you're like, I can't wrap that guy up. Like, yeah.
We're going into the World Cup, and I was talking to a few people actually about where to watch it in Houston and stuff like that. But I ended up getting in this conversation. Was talking about women's rugby. To your point, Sam, it's
a great sport by itself.
It's amazing. I love it. My daughter's 6, by the way. She's going. We have a professional rugby team here, the Sabercats. They're doing a young kids flag rugby skills clinic, and she's like, Dad, I want to go. I'm like, oh yeah, we can sign you up for that immediately.
Yeah. And the other one there's another game that is just an amazing example of athleticism is rugby sevens.
Oh, sevens is
most of the time what you'll find is like in American football, and I'm distinguishing that because of course we have a global audience. But in American football, it's very often sprints and hard hits, and then a little, I won't say walk, but then you sort of reset and sprint. Rugby for the most part is like a marathon by comparison. And so you're running hard, but you're not sprinting all the time. Like there's times when it happens, but the play doesn't stop as much, and it's always moving and rolling, right? Generally speaking, sevens is a sprint for the entire duration. You've never seen athletes like this. They are physically strong, they are flexible, and they move like spit.
Got
just
bigger lungs than everyone else.
For anybody who has not watched rugby sevens, first of all, it's in the Olympics, so you definitely should go check it out.
And it's 7 on a side on a full field.
It's super, super fast. Go watch Fiji. Go the men's or women's team. Go watch any Fijian sevens game, and you're going to instantly be hooked. It's so they're amazing.
About 3 minutes into a rugby sevens match, I'm dying. Like I can't. Oh. No, and for now, forget it. But even when I was fit, I mean, like no. Just,
I did
it's
that.
Great to watch.
Me and my old rugby team flew up to Alaska, and they call it the Pitch of Dreams up there. This guy has this massive house. It has its own website, but he invites teams from all over the world. And it's during the summer, so kickoff, it's midnight sevens, right?
Oh wow!
It's beautiful, first of all, playing rugby up in Alaska. But yeah, to your point, exhausting. Like the amount of pickle juice that I drank in one summer playing sevens and blueberries and Cheez-Its that were consumed was just probably unheard of. But yeah.
So when I used to play, by the way, a competition, now this was just when we used to do club and city. But a competition was 3 things, right? The game. And you could lose the game and you could win the day. And so the second was drinking. So you'd all go out drinking. And the third was singing. Because there was always a team bard in those days who knew all these dirty songs and whatnot. And you'd all have to sing along together. And by the end, you could win 2 out of 3 and you could still win.
But what about shooting the boot, Sam?
You're going to have to explain that one.
So actually in rugby culture, it's like the home team has to take the away team out for dinner and drinks. The teams are almost always sponsored by a pub. Look, you don't want to be.
We were sponsored by a bar when I was
right. So it's like you don't want to be dirty hitting somebody with no pads and then have to go drink a beer with them, right? Like that's kind of keeps the game civil. Well, the other side of that is there's some rules around rugby culture, but specifically singing. If you mess up a song, you have to do what they call shooting the boot, which means somebody's cleat that was worn during that game is going to get a bunch of various liquids put in it. You're going to have to chug it, and then you have to redeem yourself by starting the song over and not messing up the lyric. So being a rookie on a rugby team,
we should do that in cyber.
What's the rules on that, Sam?
I think we should have songs in the cyber for dealing with risk. And I did a haiku once. I did requirements because somebody challenged me to do this. It'd be easy with ChatGPT, so there's no real fun in that. But I did a haiku. I did requirements as haiku, all the 14 syllables and everything. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Sam always taking it back to bards.
You
just want bards in real life.
I want bards in real life. It's not fair.
Yeah.
But you notice, like, any place where there's like a really tight camaraderie, though, that exists. The military, think about that. We run to cadence. We sing and almost everything that we do. Rugby is the same way. Football, sporting events always have like some sort of projected music upon them. But where those teams are,
Wales, have you ever been to a game in Wales? The whole stadium sings. It's crazy.
No. Well, so we were talking about this before the podcast too. I had this immense opportunity. I was down in Australia for work, and I got to go over to New Zealand, and I watched the All Blacks. So the New Zealand rugby team, they do a haka, this tribal war dance, and there's a few different versions of it against Australia, which is obviously their rival. And it was I literally got goosebumps. But I mean. The team is doing it on the pitch, and then you've got all the natives around you who are doing it too, the locals and stuff. And it's like,
that's really cool.
It's hard to not be like transported back in time and be imagining like looking into the tree line and hearing these people screaming and you're like, oh dang, all right, like.
And you're like, I'm not playing rugby here, is what they would have said.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll just go have the World Cup in Australia, I think is what we'll do. Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave this island. We'll go to the next one. Yeah. But it's such an amazing sport. And yeah, bards, underrated, right? I mean, gotta have them.
It's always fun. So Matt, we talked about a lot of things. We went from field CISOs, who I guess are the team bards, maybe, to the right philosophy when approaching some of this stuff, and the personal dimension here. We also, I think we could also maybe talk a little bit about what do you think is most important at the moment, value wise. So you've been doing the CISO gig for a little bit. Do you have any advice for any other field CISOs, or for people, or forget that for a minute, anybody who's a security whisperer or champion in their company, and they're like, you know what, I'm not getting people to listen to me, or
people that want to become a security
any
whisperer?
Thoughts from either of you? Actually,
yeah.
I mean, so my 2 cents on that is, like I said, at some point, given enough time and hopefully you're driven enough to master whatever subject has piqued your interest in cybersecurity, you're going to have the fundamentals down. At some point, the inhibitor isn't the technical knowledge. It's the ability to go interface with your human counterpart in the business who you don't necessarily understand why what they're doing is important, and they don't understand why what you're trying to get them to do is important. One of the biggest things that has helped me in my career, and that I recommend to literally everybody, I don't care what level you're at, you're going to have to influence somebody at some point in your career. Go take a Toastmasters class.
Oh yeah.
Go read a couple of books, go to Toastmasters, and then go to your local cybersecurity meetups and interface with people who don't have an agenda. They just want to figure out, hey, we have this problem. Can I get some advice from somebody who's not trying to sell me something? That would be my advice.
That's solid. The only thing I would add to it is, in the end, have the same, if you are in this position, genuinely be interested in people, rather than commercial things first. The other one is try to get involved beyond, and the meetups is a great suggestion, but also in the community. I teach, but I also try to mentor. Some of the most interesting people I've had to deal with or work with have been not because I had to, but because I wound up working with them and encountering them in ways I never expected. So like, mentoring a student at the local university, for instance, or helping out somebody in a small business. I've just been asked to speak at a local chamber of commerce, and I'm like, what do they want to hear about even? And because I have no idea, right? I know that they're suffering from ransomware, but do they even know that?
Do they know what that means?
Right.
Other than, the news headline, do you understand what ransomware is and how this happened?
Yeah. I mean, do they expect me to come in and talk about that? So just getting ready for one of those and is really hard, in some cases.
Well, they're on a different, most of the people I imagine that are going to be, they're on a different plane when it comes to business, right? Like their frame of reference is probably, they do business with the community, or maybe the community plus the surrounding towns. Typically the people that are part of a chamber of commerce, are regional businesses, versus you are in a global business and you see global problems. So I think that's a major difference, between what they expect. They don't, like the problems that Zscaler has and deals with, these people would never even think about, would be my guess. Like, cause they're operating a small business. Typically there might be folks that are not, but it's a total different world. Like they want point of technology for them is, how do I get the technology that I need in one package and one solution as cheap as possible, right? How do I get my customer management? How do I secure it?
Yeah, and that's the other thing is like a lot of these customers in like that in those segments, the smaller side of things, they have cybersecurity insurance regulations now, and they're like, put in a PAM solution, and they're like, what the hell is PAM? Why do I need
Who is she and why do I need to talk to her?
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I've done some just friendly consulting stuff with like construction companies that have been hit with ransomware, and, going in and talking to the owner of the company, and they're like, dude, my guys don't even like the fact that they have to have a laptop. Talking to them about cybersecurity is not like, you don't be the 9 millionth person who comes in there and tells them don't click on suspicious email links. They're already not listening. At some point,
lucky if you don't get a beer domed off your head.
Right. I mean, at some point we have to put controls around there, because the human element's always going to be there, right? But today's world is it's kind of crazy because you have these industries that historically haven't been super cybersecurity forward, but are being kind of forced to be now.
Yeah. And it's about to get much harder. I know we jokingly referred to ChatGPT earlier and generative language models and LLMs. But honestly, all the advice we've given people so far is not all. The vast majority of it is useless. Hey, look for the typo. Hey, look for the bad logo. Hey, look for the bad URL. That stuff is not going to be...
I have such a counter opinion to most of the industry on ChatGPT. Yes, it will create some more adversarial capabilities, but I think we're missing the point totally, most people, that it changes the fundamental model on how we do things. So people think about, this is how I do things today. This will change maybe a micro or disrupt how I do things. And it's such an I-focused thing versus I look at this next wave of technology of changing how you interact with technology in general. Like I think I might have said on one of our podcasts. I don't know if I said on one of our podcasts, but the keyboard and the mouse are such an antiquated way to, as an input and management system. Really think about that. Terrible. Like you sit there and you press all these little buttons and you move this thing around in a configuration that you've had to learn to interact with this. And what these technologies do is start opening up the ability to fundamentally change the model and the way we do technology. And yes, that will come with some negative things, but the benefits are going to be so much further than what we can imagine or even do right now. And we're in the first wave of this. So the first wave, for instance, that I think is really interesting is ChatGPT is really good at content generation. So what you can do with that intelligently right now is game SEO. You can actually make your website work better. So my friend who's starting a small business, we've sat down and we use ChatGPT to generate content, write articles. So their website's going to rank above everyone else's in the local area.
You need to do that for this podcast, Jacob. Get on, man.
I only have so many hours in the day. And so you can essentially use that to generate all this content. And so businesses that don't understand any of this or any of that, their websites now are going to rank so much lower. But what's end up going to happen is Google's going to change what they do. And this is going to break Google altogether. Google might even go away. Like Google searching might be a thing of the past. Like the way we interact, I use Bing's ChatGPT all the time, just yell at it and then it gives me an answer. I'm like, hey, Bing, can my dog eat this? As it's licking something off the floor and it summarizes all the stuff on it and gives me references. But you have to step away from the way we do things today and think about total futurism. You have to have a futurist mindset when looking at this stuff and not be thinking about how it just impacts little tactical, but my job's going to be harder or attackers can do things. Like, who cares? That's not what this is about.
Yeah, I imagine a world where... Go ahead, Craig.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I was like, I really like that.
Me too.
And that's something that I try to instill in like the CISOs and stuff that I'm talking, especially like there's certain organizations that are more resistant or certain verticals that are more resistant to change. And that seems to be the traffic cop. You have to get my stamp of approval before you put anything in production, right? Instead of being more of that business enablement. I think you're right, Jacob. I think it's, you're going to evolve or kind of go away.
Right. Precisely.
So, as a thought experiment here, years ago, the University of Chicago did this encephalogram stuff, right? Where they were literally looking at the visual cortex in the brain and parts of the brain, and they were correlating it with machine learning to images so they could effectively do mind reading, and that's actually got more advanced. So imagine you do away with the keyboard and the mouse, as you called it, Jacob, right? And you start to have a direct machine-to-brain interface. Neuromancer, William Gibson, thought it would take a plug, but I don't think it will, right? And I know that Elon Musk is working on a direct one, but Neuralink, I think it's called. But let's put that to one side. Imagine you in a world where it can be directly interfaced with. So think of high bandwidth, direct to brain, multi-channel connection, and you're now interacting. So now it's difficult enough to tell when intellectual contamination happens when you work on something with someone. So what if two brains are working on something and interacting with all this technology? First of all, whose idea is whose? That's tough. And we have to get the privacy right and the security right with your whole brain potentially open. Now imagine what it's like if you disconnect someone. So is it a fundamental human right to be connected to something that throughout no point in our species history we've been connected to? Because your whole way of operating is going to change when you start to interface that way. And then someone's going to work that way and live that way and love that way. And they're going to, what's me versus someone else? And then, hey, you're going to prison and you don't have the right to do that anymore. Well, what about crime? I mean,
that's there we go. Very interesting. That's very, very interesting. It reminds me of, have you ever, I know you have, Sam, have you ever read like the Ready Player One, Ready Player Two books?
I haven't read the second one. I read the first one. Yeah.
Okay. I boycotted the second one forever because I was like, this is obviously just a scheme to get more money. Right. But the second book was actually pretty good. So I highly recommend it.
I just finished the book I was reading yesterday. I'll add that to my queue.
So
I love Ready Player One. My wife read it too. Loved it. I read the same year I read The Martian. They were both
Player
great
Two.
books that year.
Read it.
I didn't too.
Read Ready Player Two. It's a very interesting way that they continue the story, and it kind of touches on this what you were talking about. I won't spoil it too much, but essentially the thing is like you're in their metaverse, right? And all of a sudden there's a piece of malware or something happens to it fries your neural
link, the wetware,
and it won't let you out of the game, but your body is fatiguing. And your body is going to break down. Your brain can only handle a certain
this
load.
Is like Sword Art Online style.
Yeah. So check it out. It's really good.
Neuromancer did that as well years ago. We're talking the 80s. It was talking about when you interface with the computer, there's programs that you fight with, essentially. They're called intrusion countermeasure enhancements, ICE. Some of it could fry your brain back and could kill you. But in this case, it's that notion of not being able to disconnect. Because I imagine
I for one look forward to that.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and the concept is, what about like rogue AIs that can process faster than your brain can, that are inherently stronger than you, faster, smarter, whatever. So yeah, read it and let me know what you think. But in that same
or take
thing,
over your body.
Yeah. Essentially, that's what's happening. Right?
Don't spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Not. You're good. Read
you put a spoiler alert up when people.
I don't think it's that much of a spoiler alert, but I think this is the note we should.
The other side of it is my daughter. I mean, my daughter started kindergarten this year, right? So I'm taking her into a classroom, and it was amazing. And it was amazing until it wasn't, right? Like her teacher's like been a teacher for 34 years or something like that. And she's like telling me like, I've been teaching and I love kids and I've been doing it this way for 34 years. And I kind of sat back and like, there was that part of me that felt comforted as a parent that I was like, oh man, my kid's in safe hands, right? This person clearly knows what they're doing. And then there was the other part of me that was like,
1988. Yeah.
I was like, damn, 34 years and you haven't changed anything? I don't know if that's the best. Like, shouldn't we be refining our educational procedures like year over year? I mean, there's iPads and technology now. Are you still teaching like cursive and abacus? Like, what's going on?
Like, I've got a speak and spell in the back of the room.
It's great.
there's a TI-99 back there.
Yeah. You know what I mean, though? It's kind of a crazy thing because even now, like Isabella, one of the electives that I got to sign her up for was kids in coding. And I'm like, she's 6 years old and learning how to code Minecraft and Roblox games. Yeah, me too. I mean, that's the future, right? That's where they're going.
My son's been begging me to do that. He's 7. Yeah, he wants to do the exact same thing.
I recommend it, man. I mean, she's only been doing it for a week, but I mean, so far it's pretty cool.
They grow up so fast, don't they?
Oh man. Nuts.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Jacob, you think we should be bringing up? Because we're right at the hour mark.
This is it. That's the
Craig, was there anything that we didn't talk about you thought we should have dived into?
I mean, I was kind of following you. I love the conversation, so I was just kind of following.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could talk to you forever here.
I think we could talk about AI. I'd love to hear more about your military experience. There's so much we could do. But
yeah. The AI stuff is kind of, I guess the only thing that scares me about ChatGPT really isn't the adversarial stuff. It's really just the inherent flaws in machine learning and stuff like that. These things are being programmed, so they have implicit bias, right? Where's the bias come from? Who's programming these robots to make sure that we don't carry on these like cultural stereotypes and everything else, you know? So that's the stuff that worries me. And then we saw over COVID regardless of which side of that fence you fall on, how easy it was through media to manipulate. And you kind of fell in one of two camps. You weren't allowed to be in the middle anymore. It was like, you're either with us or you're against us. So if you have something like chat,
get me started on that one.
that's throwing everybody into, if I say, hey, write me a paper on the color orange, and then all of a sudden I have a difference of opinion on what the real shade of orange is, am I now the outlier, right? So, I mean, obviously you can extend that to a million different scenarios, but that's where my mind goes with that stuff. Isn't really like our adversaries are already going to be probably more well-equipped. They share information better than we do, like all of that type of stuff. So yeah, there's a million different things we probably could talk about.
No, there's a ton there to unpack, just by itself. The whole, yeah, I'm just trying to think about what to pick on first with your shade of orange. I think we should
save it for.
Yeah, because you want me to save it for another one. The whole shade of orange thing. I was going to talk about how Italians
people already say
totally
an hour is a large commitment.
Right.
Go farther.
We talk about implicit bias in AI. And get eight people on here.
so the bias thing, I do want to say one thing, which is after one of our recent podcasts, I have to just say this because I have to do justice here. Someone said, I don't know if I agree with you on something because I think
thankfully.
Yeah, no, this is good. But I said, like, go write it in the comments. Other people can like chime in too. I think when we get bias, it tells us one of two things. Either we're doing it wrong, or it's holding a mirror up to ourselves so that we become aware of something, right? Either we know we don't want the bias and we go and we root it out, or we're not aware the bias exists and the mirror is helping keep us honest to some degree. And I think that's a really important thing because sometimes you're like, wait, we do this thing? I wasn't even aware we had this discrimination in our society or this injustice, right? So to some degree, the AI is going to help us find the unfairness, find the thing that's wrong. And I think we're always on a quest to try to do better, or we should.
Or does it hide it more efficiently to where it's not as uncovered?
Yeah. So I was actually petitioning at the time, and I'm writing a petitioning. Petitioning's wrong. It implies I'm going to someone. I'm advocating for having review boards and ethical review boards around the use of the AI toolkit in general. Not because I want to slow research down, but because I want us to be stopping and thinking about, should we do things? And once we do, what are we learning from it? And that those dialogues should be there. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because somebody had said, hey, I don't know if I agree with you on the whole point about bias in general when we were talking a little while ago. But yeah.
I hope.
That's a good point. I think that's a thing too. I mean, you can see that time and time again, even with the AI ML stuff that we have now, right? Go ask something that does facial recognition to draw a picture of what a criminal looks like. I bet you it's pretty biased.
I bet it looks a lot like Jacob, by the way.
on that note,
we're all up on Mount Stupid right now.
On that note, I'm going to now hit stop.
Yeah, I had to do that. No, except it'd be Jacob with a ponytail. That was what it would be.
That was the.
For those who don't know, Jacob used to have a ponytail.
I did,
and that's how you get a non job, right? That's
it is. Yeah.
No, always trust
Craig. Thank you
in thank.
Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you guys for having me on.
Another hour at some point.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. It's great seeing you.